Listen carefully, chosen ones, because what I'm about to reveal will shake the very foundation of everything you thought you knew about that betrayal. Right now, there's someone lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at their ceiling, haunted by the biggest mistake of their life. They're replaying every moment they had with you, every word they said, every choice they made that led to losing the one person who could have saved their soul. And here's the truth that will burn through their bones until their dying day. They didn't just lose you, they lost their direct line to heaven itself. But before we dive into the depths of their torment, let me tell you what you really are. You weren't just another person walking through their story. You were the answer to prayers they forgot they prayed. You were the blessing wrapped in human form, carrying spiritual currency so rare that most people go their entire lives without encountering it even once. You brought peace that didn't need explanation, wisdom that didn't need validation, and love that didn't need conditions. You were the real deal in a world drowning in counterfeits. Here's where everything shifts, and here's the first truth that will make everything click into place. They knew exactly what you were from the moment you entered their life. Deep in their spirit, they recognized the divine assignment standing before them. But instead of falling to their knees in gratitude, something dark and twisted began stirring in the shadows of their unhealed heart. Fear, jealousy, unworthiness. A voice that whispered they didn't deserve someone so pure, so they better destroy you before you figured out you were too good for them. The psychological warfare began immediately, though it was so subtle you almost missed it. They started testing your limits, pushing boundaries, creating chaos to see if your peace was real or just performance. When you stayed calm during their storms, instead of being grateful, they became suspicious. When you forgave their mistakes quickly, instead of feeling loved, they felt exposed. Your consistency highlighted their instability. Your integrity exposed their deception. Your light revealed every shadow they'd been hiding in. Here's what they never told you during those testing phases. They were deliberately choosing drama over divinity, and now they're drowning in the consequences. You brought a peace so profound it could calm storms they didn't even realize they were caught in. But instead of recognizing that you were sent as a blessing, they labeled your tranquility as boring, your stability as predictable, your grace as weakness. They were addicted to chaos because chaos felt familiar, chaos felt like home. Chaos didn't require them to evolve beyond their comfort zone of dysfunction. So they ran toward the loud, flashy, messy energy that mirrored their own brokenness. What they didn't understand was that you weren't just peaceful, you were powerful. You carried favor that opened doors they couldn't even see. You carried protection that shielded them from battles they never knew were being fought. You carried wisdom that could have guided them through every maze life would throw at them, but all of that was invisible to someone addicted to validation and drama. But here's the twist that changes everything. While they were busy questioning your authenticity, you were busy being exactly what they claimed they wanted. You supported their dreams when they were too broken to believe in them. You stood beside them during battles they were too weak to fight alone. You brought solutions to problems they created with their own chaos. You were the mirror reflecting their potential back to them, and it terrified them to their core. What they couldn't handle was that you weren't meant to be loved like everyone else. You didn't come with a script or a manual for easy consumption. You showed up real, raw, and ready for depth that most people spend lifetimes avoiding. You didn't package yourself for their convenience or shrink yourself for their comfort. You offered soul when they were used to surface, vision when they were comfortable with blindness, alignment when they preferred chaos. Your love had layers that their shallow experience couldn't comprehend. You didn't come to entertain, you came to evolve them. You triggered healing they weren't prepared to face, growth they weren't ready to embrace, truth they weren't willing to confront. Instead of rising to meet you at your level, they labeled you as too intense, too deep, too much. But you weren't too much. They were too wounded to receive what was pure, too broken to handle what was whole, too comfortable in dysfunction to appreciate what was divine. The betrayal wasn't spontaneous, it was strategic. While you were pouring life into their vision, they were secretly building an escape route. They convinced themselves that your depth was too intense, your standards too high, your love too real. They needed someone easier to manage, someone who wouldn't challenge them to grow, someone who wouldn't hold them accountable for their choices. They wanted the benefits of blessing without the responsibility that comes with receiving sacred gifts. Here's the second truth, and this one's going to sting them when they finally understand it. You weren't just offering them love, you were offering them access. Access to levels of favor they'd never experienced. Access to peace their chaos-addicted soul had never tasted. Access to a future so bright it required spiritual sunglasses just to glimpse it. But they traded that access for someone whose spirit smelled like battery acid and bad decisions. You were the portal they rejected without understanding the doorway they were slamming shut. You weren't just another person passing through their life. You were the access point to everything they'd been praying for. Growth, healing, direction, stability, real love. You weren't just sent to love them, you were sent to activate them, to unlock doors in their destiny they didn't even know existed. Most people aren't prepared when their blessing shows up looking human. They expect answers to fall from the sky, but heaven sent you instead. You came with words they needed to hear, support they'd never known, energy that shifted entire rooms just by your presence. You challenged them to rise, not by force but by example, and that terrified them to their core. They wanted elevation without accountability, blessings without the discipline required to keep them. So instead of stepping through the portal you represented, they turned their back on divine opportunity disguised as human connection. The moment of betrayal revealed everything you needed to know about their character. They didn't just choose someone else, they chose someone who represented the exact opposite of everything you embodied. Where you brought stability, this person brought destruction. Where you offered healing, they brought harm disguised as excitement. Where you carried divine favor, they carried curses wrapped in cologne and confusion. The contrast wasn't accidental, it was intentional warfare against everything you represented. But watch this, the universe doesn't play games when it comes to protecting chosen ones. The moment they betrayed you, spiritual laws activated that they never saw coming. You see, when someone carrying divine light is mistreated, heaven doesn't just notice, it responds with the kind of justice that makes demons tremble, not because you called down curses, but because they violated the sacred by touching what was holy with unholy hands. They didn't just betray you, they rejected their own protection, removed their own covering, severed their own lifeline to divine favor. You weren't just someone nice to have around, you were a spiritual shield. Your presence carried protection they never understood. They thought life was going well because of their own strength, their own luck, their own merit, but it wasn't. It was because you were standing in the gap for them, interceding behind closed doors, keeping battles from even reaching their doorstep. While they were busy thinking you were just too spiritual or too intense, they didn't realize you were the reason their chaos hadn't exploded yet. They got comfortable in your grace, mistook divine protection for coincidence. When they betrayed you through lies, cheating, disrespect, or flat-out abandonment, they didn't just break your heart, they broke the spiritual agreement that had been covering their life. You were mercy walking beside them in human form, and when they hurt you, that mercy pulled back. Here's where their nightmare begins, and here's the third truth that will haunt them forever. The peace they enjoyed while you were present wasn't their own, it was yours. The favor opening doors in their life wasn't their merit, it was your covering. The protection keeping their world stable wasn't their strength, it was your prayers. When you left, you didn't just take your presence, you took the hedge that was holding back every storm they'd been accumulating through their poor choices. The person they betrayed you for became their first taste of consequences. What looked like passion was actually poison. What felt like freedom was actually bondage. What seemed like upgrade was actually the biggest downgrade of their existence. They went from dining on spiritual filet mignon to choking down spiritual fast food, and their soul began starving in ways they couldn't understand. They sold a diamond for dust, and now they're choking on the regret. They had something rare, sacred, and priceless standing right in front of them. You were loyalty wrapped in love, wisdom that didn't need to be loud, substance in a world full of surface-level distractions. But instead of cherishing what was real, they chose to chase what looked good on the outside, flashy, loud, chaotic, something that sparkled in the moment but had no actual value. They thought they made an upgrade, but all they did was exchange treasure for trash. They underestimated your worth because you didn't come with drama, didn't need attention to be powerful, didn't require validation to know your value. You were deep, real, consistent, but they weren't looking for real. They were looking for entertainment, for someone they could control, for energy that wouldn't challenge them to grow. Now every comparison burns because the conversations are empty, the connection is forced, the peace is gone. Deep down they know they messed up. Pride won't let them say it, but their spirit knows, their soul feels it. They remember how you used to show up even when you had every reason not to, how you held space for them without conditions, how you loved without needing to be the center of attention. And now they're left with dust in their mouth and memories they can't swallow. Trompandiga Bononos started falling. Relationships around them began crumbling because your energy had been the glue holding their entire social ecosystem together. Opportunities they thought were guaranteed began evaporating because your favor had been the wind beneath their wings. Plans they'd made started failing because your wisdom had been the foundation they were building on. Everything they took for granted while you were there began disintegrating the moment you walked away. But here's the beautiful part, and here's where your real power becomes undeniable. While their world was collapsing, yours was expanding. That betrayal they thought would break you actually broke every chain that was keeping you small. Their rejection became your redirection, pointing you toward a destiny that required you to walk alone for a season so you could arrive as your complete, uncompromised self. You became the humbling lesson they'll never recover from. At first they laughed, mocked you, told stories to make themselves feel better about how they treated you. They thought walking away, cheating, lying, or discarding you would be just another move in their long line of manipulations, but something about you hit different. You weren't just another person. You were the turning point, the divine test that exposed their heart, their pride, their real character. You were the person sent to give them a chance to do better, love better, choose better. But they chose ego over evolution, selfishness over growth. Now they're realizing that some mistakes don't fade with time, some betrayals come with permanent echoes. Everywhere they go, they're reminded not by you because you've elevated in silence, but by life itself. By the way new people never measure up to your soul, by the way their spirit tightens every time your name comes up, by the way peace doesn't visit them anymore. You became the mirror they smashed, and now they're forced to look at the shards no matter how many parties they attend, how many new faces they entertain, how many nights they try to drown out the past. That quiet regret follows them like a shadow, because deep down they know the truth. They were wrong, and they can't undo it. Your absence is loud, not just missing your presence, but feeling the weight of your grace, your patience, your forgiveness, all gone. The pain they caused you wasn't just random suffering, it was surgical precision, cutting away everything false, so only truth remained. Every tear shed was washing away illusions about what you would and wouldn't tolerate. Every sleepless night was preparing you for a dawn they could never comprehend. You weren't just healing from their betrayal, you were evolving because of it, transforming into a version of yourself so powerful it would make their replacement look like a practice round. Here comes the fourth awakening, and this one's going to make them sick to their stomach. They thought they were trading up, but they actually traded a diamond for a cubic zirconia that's already losing its fake shine. The person they chose over you can't fill the spiritual void you left behind because they don't possess the depth, the wisdom, or the divine connection that made you irreplaceable. They're discovering that excitement isn't the same as peace, drama isn't the same as passion, and loud isn't the same as deep. They tried to make you chase, but ended up losing the prize. They thought if they pulled away just enough, you'd come running. If they gave less, you'd give more. If they created confusion, you'd cling to clarity. But chosen ones don't operate like that. You're not desperate, you're discerning. They misread your loyalty as weakness, saw your patience and thought it meant you'd tolerate anything. So they tested your limits with mind games, hot and cold behavior, strategic emotional withdrawal, one day present, the next day distant. They gave just enough attention to keep you interested, but not enough to feel secure. It was all strategy, emotional manipulation, designed to keep you off balance. But chosen ones don't beg for breadcrumbs. They pay attention, collect patterns, notice disrespect, dressed up as mixed signals, and when they've seen enough, they don't explode, they exit, quietly, completely, with no drama, just distance. That's when reality hit them like a freight train. They weren't expecting you to leave. They thought you'd be the one who stuck around no matter what, but your silence broke them in ways your words never could. They realized too late that you weren't just another option. You were the prize, the peace, the presence that elevated their life without needing to be loud about it. Every conversation with their new choice reminds them of the intellectual stimulation you provided effortlessly. Every manufactured moment of happiness exposes the authentic joy that existed naturally when you were present. Every fight, every disappointment, every moment of chaos whispers your name like a ghost they can't exorcise. They're trying to teach someone else how to love them the way you did instinctively, but you can't coach what comes from the soul. The most devastating realization they're facing now is understanding what you actually represented in their life. You weren't just another relationship, you were a divine intervention. You weren't just good company, you were spiritual assignment. You weren't just someone who cared, you were someone carrying keys to doors they didn't even know existed. Your presence was mercy walking beside them in human form, and they responded to grace with garbage. But here's what's really destroying them. They mistook your grace as neediness, and now they're begging heaven for access. You gave with an open heart, stayed when you could have walked away, supported them even when they were unworthy of your presence. But you weren't doing it out of desperation. You were acting out of love, out of strength, out of divine purpose. They saw your softness and thought you were weak, assumed that because you were consistent, you were dependent, believed that because you gave second chances you had no standards. What they failed to see was the power behind your patience, the strength behind your stillness, the purpose behind your loyalty. You weren't staying because you had to, you stayed because you were led to. You were the glue, the quiet intercessor, the emotional stabilizer. You carried the spiritual weight of that connection without needing recognition. You prayed when they didn't know it, encouraged them when they were ready to give up, poured into them when no one else would. Now that you've withdrawn, the truth is crystal clear. The peace left with you. The growth stopped when you stepped away. The balance vanished the moment your energy pulled back. They're finally seeing just how much you carried, not just emotionally, but spiritually. You were the covering they never honored, and now they're crying out to heaven, trying to replace what they so easily dismissed. Tompadzing patient, here's where the story gets even more intense. While they're drowning in regret, you're ascending to altitudes they could never reach. That betrayal they meant to diminish you with became the catalyst for your greatest elevation. You're not the same person who was betrayed. You're the upgraded version who emerged from the fire they lit, refined and purified into something even more powerful. They tried to replace presence with performance, but energy never lies. The new person may be louder, more visible, always putting on a show. They post together, laugh harder in public, exaggerate every moment as if the world needs convincing. But it's not real. It's performance designed to mask the loss of something much deeper. Your presence didn't need applause, didn't need to be on camera, didn't have to prove anything to anyone. Your love was silent strength. Your connection was real and rooted. Now they've replaced that with someone who's all noise and no foundation, always performing, always chasing attention, always showing off something that doesn't even exist behind closed doors. Energy never lies, and they can post all the happy pictures they want, but their spirit knows something is off. The presence is gone. The new person may flatter more, try harder to be seen, but what's missing is depth, alignment, that quiet, powerful connection you gave without trying. You didn't need to compete or outshine anyone. You just existed, and that was enough to shift their entire world. Now even in their loudest moments, they feel emptiness because the person they traded you for can't touch the places you healed, can't sit in silence without it becoming awkward, can't hold space when things fall apart. Everything feels manufactured, looks good in pictures but hollow in real life. But let's talk about what's really eating them alive in those quiet moments when they can't distract themselves anymore. It's not just missing you, it's understanding they failed the most important test of their life. They had direct access to divine favor through you, and they threw it away for counterfeit affection. They had someone praying for them behind closed doors, and they betrayed that covering for someone who can't even spell intercession. The fifth understanding is the one that will torment them until their last breath. They realize now that you were the real mirror, and they smashed you to avoid seeing themselves. Your integrity exposed where they were faking. Your consistency revealed where they were unstable. Your peace highlighted where they were chaotic. Instead of letting your presence inspire growth, they chose to attack the mirror rather than fix what it reflected. The circular justice in this story is breathtaking. They thought they were writing your ending, but they were actually signing their own spiritual bankruptcy papers. They convinced themselves you were too much, but they're discovering they weren't enough to handle what heaven had placed in their hands. They labeled your depth as intensity, but they're drowning in the shallowness they chose instead. Watch this beautiful irony unfold. The person they traded you for is now their daily reminder of what authentic looks like by contrast. Where you were substance, this replacement is surface. Where you were secure, they're insecure. Where you brought solutions, they multiply problems. The very chaos they mistook for excitement has revealed itself as exactly what it was, destruction wearing a pretty mask. But here's where your dominance becomes absolute chosen one. You're not sitting around mourning what they lost. You're not checking their social media, hoping they'll come crawling back. You're not diminishing yourself to make space for their regret. You're rising like the sun rises, not to prove a point, but because that's what suns do. Your light doesn't need their permission to shine. The universe is orchestrating a symphony of justice that would make angels applaud. Every door that closes in their life echoes with your absence. Every opportunity that slips through their fingers carries the fragrance of favor they forfeited. Every moment of chaos they experience whispers the peace they traded away. They're living in the shadow of what they lost, while you're basking in the light of what you've gained. Here's the sixth and most devastating reality, the one that seals their fate. They can't find your energy anywhere else because what you carried wasn't just personality, it was purpose. You weren't just loving them, you were activating them. You weren't just supporting them, you were unlocking them. When they betrayed you, they didn't just lose a person, they lost their access code to the next level of their existence. The Obsidian Inner Order is a sanctuary for those who have walked difficult paths and emerged with wisdom others can't see. We understand that some experiences exist outside the boundaries of what most people consider possible or acceptable to discuss. Every week we gather live on Zoom, real people with real faces sharing real stories without judgment. There's space here for the experiences you've carried in silence, the patterns you've noticed that others dismiss, the intuitive knowledge you've gained through your journey. We don't just listen, we understand. When you're struggling to make sense of your experiences, when you feel gaslit by a world that refuses to acknowledge your reality, you can return to our recorded calls and remember that your perception is valid. Join the Obsidian Inner Order, where your reality is honored and your voice is heard. Link in description. The most beautiful part of this entire experience is how it ends for you. While they're stuck in a cycle of regret and what-ifs, you're stepping into the fullness of your calling. That betrayal they thought would define you actually refined you. Their rejection became your resurrection. Their inability to handle your light became your liberation to shine even brighter. You're attracting people now who know how to handle precious things with care. You're opening doors they don't even know exist. You're accessing levels of peace, purpose, and possibility that make their current chaos look like the spiritual ghetto it truly is. They thought they were choosing freedom when they betrayed you, but they actually chose prison while setting you free. The final awakening, the one that brings this full circle, they didn't just betray you, they betrayed their own destiny. You were the bridge to everything they claimed they wanted, and they burned that bridge for fool's gold that's already tarnishing. They'll spend the rest of their lives wondering what could have been if they'd had the courage to receive the blessing instead of rejecting it. But you, chosen one, you're not looking back anymore. You're not wondering what if, because you know exactly what is. You are the blessing they couldn't handle, the diamond they mistook for glass, the answer to prayers they didn't deserve to have answered. Their betrayal wasn't your ending, it was your beginning. Their rejection wasn't your defeat, it was your decoration for surviving spiritual warfare disguised as a relationship. So let them live with their choices while you live in your power. Let them chase shadows while you become the light. Let them settle for substitutes while you prepare for the real thing. Because the universe is preparing to hand you everything they thought they were taking away, and when it arrives you'll understand why their betrayal was actually the greatest gift they could have given you, the gift of discovering who you really are when everything false falls away. They thought they were the authors of your destiny, but they were just a comma in a sentence that ends with your complete and total victory. Welcome to your elevation, chosen one. Your real story starts now.